Hey everyone, my name is Christy Barber with Christy Barber Consulting, and I have two of my friends today from Bryant Park Consulting, Michael and Hamza. They work specifically with the NetSuite software. So I'll just give them a chance real quick to introduce themselves, and then we're going to dive in today about how NetSuite is a really viable fit when you're in the small, medium-sized business. So Michael, I'll let you kick it off.
Yeah, thank you, Chrissy. Thanks for having us today. Michael Chesin, everybody. I am Bryant Park's Director of Strategic Alliances, Private Equity, and Advisory. I'm based in Atlanta, Georgia. I've been in the ERP space for about a decade. So pleasure to be here with you all today.
Awesome.
Hamza?
Perfect. Second one up. Hey, Christy, thanks for having us today. My name is Hamza. I oversee Bryant Park Consulting's sales and solution architecture practice. So any net new business either rolls through myself or my team of solutions architects. So I basically oversee all of revenue for the organization. I've been in the ecosystem for over a decade, architecting and implementing NetSuite and adjacent software for small mom and pops all the way to your Fortune 500 level companies that utilize NetSuite. So I have a lot of experience with strategic deployment, risk mitigation, and just making sure that the choice that prospective customers make with their future state ERP is as well suited for them as possible.
Awesome. So I think one thing we can kind of get started with is just an overview of who Bryant Park is. You are a SI partner for NetSuite. If you guys can just give a little bit of the background of how the firm got started, just how you guys have been involved with it.
Yeah, I can take this one. And Mike, if you want to add some content there, that'd be great. But Bryant Park Consulting, at the end of the day, is an implementation partner. So we solely focus on the implementation side of things. We do not focus on reselling software, and that really is a key strategic element, I would say, to the ecosystem for NetSuite itself and Bryant Park Consulting itself, where we're not, we're really looking after our clients' needs and what is appropriate for them in that phase one or phase two and helping them build that roadmap. So it's very, very strategic in how we position ourselves. Bryant Park Consulting, I would consider us a full service shop for NetSuite. So we focus on anything and everything NetSuite, anything and everything related to some upmarket Oracle products, which we'll speak about a little bit later today as well. And we have an integration team, a customizations team, a development team, a data and analytics team. I can go on, and that really bodes to the point that we're a full service shop. So the benefit, in sum, at the end of the day, is that you never have to leave your bubble with Bryant Park Consulting. You're going to be able to be serviced and satisfied with all aspects of your ERP journey with NetSuite directly within our organization, which is a huge competitive advantage that we bring to the table. So really exciting stuff there. Now, to answer your question directly about how Bryant Park Consulting started is, I'll say this, is Bryant Park Consulting is only 4.5 years old. And we've had explosive growth in those past 4.5 years. Our kind of origination story is the best way to put it, is that there were some key folks that originally all started at NetSuite Professional Services. So this is kind of like the incubation launching pad for a lot of the consultants that are in the NetSuite ecosystem, including myself. There were some key resources that all kind of got together, met at NetSuite Professional Services, but then we all kind of sparsely went out on our own, kind of covered our own path, went either to another implementation firm, some went to Deloitte, some went to RSM, some went to other implementation partners, but then we all kind of all collectively decided it was time to come back and do things the right way. And we all kind of learned from our time apart, what was working well in the NetSuite implementation space and what was not working well in the NetSuite implementation space. And ultimately, the collective goal at mind was to make sure that we make implementations less complex, faster, and cheaper, right? And less risk averse at the end of the day. So we built policies, we built strategic rollout plans, we built our methodology to support those initiatives. And because of that, our responsibility in the ecosystem has grown tremendously. We've got a name brand for ourselves that represents that. And because of that, candidly, we've been able to have explosive growth with our private equity relationships that Michael manages with his advisory relationships as well. We've got extensive relationships with the NetSuite space. our partners in the ecosystem, which include iPaaS softwares, other adjacent platforms. And that's, again, really allowed us to make sure that we right-size implementations, the best abilities for our prospective customers at the end of the day. And that's our core focus.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'll just add, I came through to Bryant Park through somewhat of a unique path. My background is in consulting, doing software selection, similar to some of the things that you're doing, Christy. And NetSuite was always at the table for my clients, which were mid-market manufacturers and distributors. And we were big believers in that the product does what the product does, and it's really the implementation partner that is going to truly define the success or lack thereof in the project. So we spent a lot of time, of course, evaluating the product, but determining who is going to come in and implement it and work alongside the client for the next 6, 9, 12 months. And took that very seriously. We didn't just make product recommendations, we made partner recommendations as well. And I had worked with a number of partners in the NetSuite ecosystem and had kind of, I would say, varying degrees of success. And came across Bryant Park within just a few months after the company was founded, and ended up bringing Bryant Park to meet a few of my clients. And those are still, cut to the chase, those are still referenceable clients today for Bryant Park. So when I was looking for a new role for me, I reached out to the founder of Bryant Park and pitched him on an idea about kind of expanding and accelerating the explosive growth through the advisory channel. So kind of what I was doing in the private equity channel. And that's how I got here. But I became acquainted with the firm through my clients and the great work that Bryant Park did for them.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool. I think something that's interesting with NetSuite is you see it, they do a really good job advertising, and you see it at raceways, you see it on television and billboards and all of that. And working with the small, medium-sized businesses, it is one that is a lot at the forefront of their mind when they've come to the point of, hey, QuickBooks isn't doing exactly what we need it to do anymore. Even with multiple integrations with QuickBooks, trying to make it a better ecosystem, but they finally get to the point where they do outgrow it. And I would say when we're looking at that, how are you seeing your clients today? They're getting to that point of, hey, we're outgrowing QuickBooks. How and why would NetSuite be a great fit for us? And then kind of, if you can talk about that, and then we'll go into all the different industries that probably come into that as well.
Sure.
Yeah, I can kick us off there, Mike, and then maybe some additions from you. But the biggest kind of dead giveaway, I would say, is when you're outgrowing QuickBooks or you're kind of reaching that stage is where you start to cannibalize your processes to say, this order to cash process that exists for us, paying or accepting payment from our customers, we've now muddied the waters with, some other manufacturing process, hypothetically, that may exist, right? And you start to then layer in other products to facilitate that need. And long story short, you become a collector of systems, right? And that naturally makes loss of information risk go up exponentially. That naturally allows people to live in siloed systems, right? And you start to see this kind of a ball of yarn unravel right in front of you. And the core of it is you lose your financial visibility at the end of the day, right? That's the main risk that we see for majority of our companies and organizations. And at that point, the trigger point is kicked off to basically say, okay, we're ready for a new platform. And I'll let Mike kind of give his 2 cents here, but we'll talk about what we've been doing for customers that are moving from QuickBooks to NetSuite as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, the common theme is risk, right? So what Hamza just mentioned, that's risky for a business to have these siloed products and cannibalized processes and things like that. And so it's our job, and Christy, you help these people kind of mitigate that risk as well, is to come in and take a risky situation that they're in. But, some people would argue so is implementing a new ERP system and ripping out their central nervous system and replacing it with something else that they don't know how to use. And they're going to be training all of these people, yet they still have their day job and a business to run. So it's our job to come in there and kind of help them work through that. And it's one of the biggest decisions that these companies will ever make, right? They're picking a partner for the next 10, 15, 20 years. So certainly not something we take lightly, especially for these young or family-owned businesses that have put everything they've got into their company, and they've outgrown their current systems and they're ready to move to something else. And we're not going to be the folks that brings the company down via a software implementation.
No, they would hate that.
Yeah. But we just very much take it seriously that they're putting a lot of trust in us to deliver for them on the other side.
Yeah, to Mike's point, I mean, there is a significant, I would call it fiduciary duty that we have, right, to make sure that these implementations are successful. We're not talking about, $1 billion plus organization that can absorb a cost for a potential mismanaged implementation, right? These are small to medium-sized organizations that this is the lifeblood of a strategic initiative that they're rolling out for the next 5, 10-year plan that may exist there. And we recognize that, and we take that responsibility not lightly. So what, to answer your question more directly, what we're doing with QuickBooks to put a little bit rubber to the road there with that statement is, ERPs from my perspective are not complex, or they shouldn't be complex. The aspect that QuickBooks translations generally get caught up in is data. Mm-hmm. So what we have done for some of our customers that are coming off of QuickBooks, and this is going to get a little bit technical, but there's a whole ETL, extraction, transformation, load process that we've built where we can hook up into their QuickBooks environment, pull that data into a data analytics warehouse, perform kind of this recycling of information for their data, and restructure it and push it directly into NetSuite. So that process there would generally take, an organization coming off of QuickBooks where they're trying to also balance their day jobs and, you kind of catch my drift, take that exuberant load off their shoulders and allow us to do majority of the data migration for them, which has been a huge, huge success for our QuickBooks conversions. Another one that I'll quickly mention, and I'll pass it over back to you, Christy, is process standardization. A lot of the times these companies come to us and say, well, what do you recommend? What is, we don't know what we don't know. You help us kind of guide us to the finish line. And because NetSuite now at this point has done tens and thousands of implementations, they've codified something called Suite Success. So we are already coming to you as a potential customer or prospect by saying, this is the best practice for manufacturing. This is the best process for AR. This is the best practice for AP, et cetera, et cetera. And that really gives our customers confidence that there's 500 plus other companies that are like my business that are using the exact same process. Why do we have to use our historical process that has so many ups and downs in a start to finish perspective, right? So these little things make a huge impact in the implementation. Coming back to the point earlier, why we effectively formed BPC, which was to make implementations less complex and more streamlined.
Mm-hmm. I would say with small businesses, that's always a problem because people, they don't have the time to be able to give to it. Like larger organizations, they have more bodies that can do it. They a lot of times have different softwares in place that's helping keep their data clean and ready for something else. So yes, to your point, the ETL, it's extremely helpful. And sometimes QuickBooks isn't the easiest to get information out of as well. It's easy for the main things like customer, vendor, chart of accounts. But if somebody has built-in, bill of materials in there, somehow I know it can be very complex to extract other data points out and then be able to make sure, hey, is this actually how we want it? And then secondly, to the whole thing around processes, a lot of small businesses, it's been, wild, wild west in the beginning because you're just trying to get work done. You're trying to bring clients in and there aren't strategic processes that are put into place. And so when they get to the point of, hey, we're a big kid now, we're going with a legit software, what is the best way to do? Because we know what we're doing today doesn't work well, but then also what's said as a best practice doesn't really match what they're doing. And so it's kind of coming together with you guys, with consultants and saying, all right, based on who we are, where we want to go, what's strategically going to be the best types of processes for us to adopt that is for our company and also industry?
Completely agree.
Yeah. So I don't know how much you guys kind of dig in with some of your methodology around, hey, we're looking at your processes. We're kind of helping you part of some of the suite success that you guys do and defining what those will look like.
Yeah. Mike, do you want to take that?
No, I mean, definitely helping them understand what, within NetSuite are the best processes, right? Our leading practices per industry. And then, we're also working with the client and oftentimes they brought in an advisory firm, right? Which is really kind of what I'm here to do, is kind of bridge that gap. The advisory firm is going to be providing their input more on the maybe industry wide leading practices. And we're bringing to them the leading practices within NetSuite. Keeping it simple. I think that's a phrase that we're trying to really live by here at Bryant Park. It can be very tempting, get the shiny new toy, to get very fancy with things and try to do too much too fast. But keeping it simple typically will be just enough to get you where you want to be. But but I do look at it as a collaboration, us bringing it from the NetSuite and industry side and working with the client on kind of what makes them special and any advisory that they've brought in to guide them through that process.
Yeah, which is great. And I think got a couple of questions from folks that are watching. I think one of them we can kind of look into is, I think this one's really core to who NetSuite is there's always that debate from best of breed versus the all-in-one ERP. And I think NetSuite is unique because it is the best of breed. It's a hub and spoke model. You can use it with different core points. You can bring in different ancillary solutions to build what you need. How have you guys seen this come up in different debates? Because NetSuite is unique in that way.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll start off with this. For example, on your iPhone, right? You are probably using a Gmail or an Outlook app for your mail, right? And there's a good reason for that. It has more functionality. It has probably a better user experience, right? It's more connected potentially to other aspects of your day-to-day. You're not going to be using the out-of-the-box mail app that comes from an iPhone, right? You just don't even think about it anymore. It's just, okay, that's an app that I'm going to download. The same concept exists for ERP. We have now moved into this evolutionary stage of ERPs where we're moving away from this monolithic approach, this big blob of a system, to a more modular approach. You see it on your day-to-day as well. Homes are becoming modular, right? Computers are becoming more modular. I can go on, right? Golf clubs are becoming more modular. Just coming off the Masters weekend here, you can see it's in my head. So you kind of catch my drift, right? Ultimately, the ecosystem and the world is becoming a more customized, bespoke model, and that is naturally leading into how people run their businesses as well. And to support that, NetSuite has done that extremely well. You could always go to a monolithic approach, but there's always going to be a point of diminishing return where they're no longer going to upgrade that aspect of the system, or there's going to be another incumbent that comes out of the woodworks that is able to, perform that specific attribute for expense reporting or for, MES execution for manufacturing a little bit better, right? And their core focus as a business, as that third party, is to do that a little bit better, right? Mm-hmm. So naturally, you'd want to invest in that platform as opposed to a monolithic system that is not going to be investing in that. They're going to be investing in something more holistic, right? Which is great. And that's really what NetSuite's done a good job at, is investing in the platform. And ultimately, there's always going to be evolutionary aspects to the platform in terms of AI. I know there's a question that I saw earlier surrounding that, which we can get into. But the right model going into the 21st tail end of the 21st century is obviously to utilize a best of breed approach.
Mm-hmm.
I think best of breed is where it's at right now. 5, 7, 8 years ago, I was seeing a lot of the all-in-one kind of best-in-class approach being somewhat preferred because you've got one hand to shake, so to speak. And I think it turned out that it really doesn't work that way, right? You're still dealing with a number of different parties, and you're sacrificing some things that you might need that are critical just to have everything all in one. And with NetSuite, you really kind of there's plenty of our customers that are using just NetSuite, right? With no add-ons, but for when you need those, they're there to plug in relatively seamlessly. I was at a company where I started my tech career that went through the built for NetSuite process. I mean, it's not just something you sign up for. It's laborious for that vendor. It takes a lot to become a built for NetSuite product. NetSuite obviously guards that, takes that very seriously because it's their name and reputation on the line as well. So I think they've done a nice job of kind of straddling both sides of you can be the all-in-one, but they've got this huge app store essentially that can plug in the gaps. And I think that's why you see it so popular across everything from emerging businesses to private equity owned businesses, all the way up to Fortune 100 companies. And I don't think that there's a product out there that's been so diverse in their client base. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason that NetSuite has over 200 implementation partners. There's a reason why that app store keeps on growing. Mm-hmm. So it's other vendors, some of them more than others, but I won't name names, but have not been able to achieve that, have not been able to grow their partner ecosystem and that best of breed approach. And I think that they're probably regretting that now.
Yeah.
Agreed. I'll say this just quickly as well. On the opposite side of the fence, right? Obviously NetSuite, we're more of a best of breed. And these other organizations, incumbents that we generally compete with, right? From a software standpoint, they are advertising, and this is more so just for education for the people that are listening, that they are an all-in-one solution. But behind the scenes, under the hood, they are not. They grew by acquisition. There is some sort of an integration happening between their bespoke solution, right, and their core application. But it's it's lipstick on a pig is the best way to put it. And I would highly educate people to dig into that as they evaluate platforms and services as well.
Yeah, the companies that tell you they have their their own middleware that's tying all of these acquired products together and all of that. Again, it goes back to risk, and I wouldn't just take their word for it, right? I would have them show you how those are built, have them show you the number of hours that are going to go into tying those two systems together that really are under the same roof, but are they?
Right.
Do that due diligence so that it doesn't come back to bite you a few months down the road.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that they're after you to name the name. It's hilarious in the chat. But I think just one, like what Kyler is saying, will NetSuite ever do something like grow with SAP where they have a roadmap to move from NetSuite to Oracle? And what would that potentially look like?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of slick marketing, right? And that's really what that is slick marketing. They've done a great job with that. But and maybe I'm crossing the line here. I don't know. But I mean, that's really what that is at the end of the day. So I don't know what their plans are. If there's a true migration plan in place, that's certainly possible. If anybody could pull it off, it's Oracle. But I would be wary of the what's marketing versus reality, Instagram versus reality.
Yeah.
I'll say this as well. I would say Larry Ellison is a very smart man if he's listening. Where when he invested in NetSuite, which was NetLedger back in the day, I think this was the plan all along, right? To incubate and grow NetSuite customers, and then eventually, when they're ready, when they're $1 billion plus organizations, they have a path forward to move to the Oracle space. With that being said, though, we work with companies that are $5 million in revenue all the way to $1 billion plus in revenue that are still within the NetSuite platform. So that level of scalability does not exist with, in my opinion, any platform in the ecosystem. So that speaks a lot to the volumes of what NetSuite has been able to do and continues to do, which we could again speak about here with AI and some of the other aspects of scalability, to allow businesses as they grow to not be penalized by the platform that they're on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's good to have. Let's take one more question, mixed question around how can early stage businesses think about building for scale even when they're still small? So that kind of ties in with this whole growth. And I know sometimes even with my own clients, I've seen, to your point, they're millions and billions of dollars, but they're still staying on the NetSuite ecosystem because they haven't outgrown it yet. And I think a lot of times people get caught up with, well, I do X in revenue, so there's no way this system that worked for me when I was doing 5 million a year could still work for me. And they start thinking sometimes too big instead of really putting the software to the test of what it can do.
I'm personally seeing a big theme in the ecosystem right now where big billion-dollar plus organizations are foregoing the SAP implementations, are foregoing these monolithic systems to come to NetSuite because ultimately they're getting really their bang for their buck is the best way to put it, right? They're getting enterprise-grade technology before a fraction of the cost. So why can't we say the same thing about small to medium-sized businesses also utilizing that from a bottom-up perspective rather than a top-down, right, from enterprise to small to medium-sized? So if we really want to answer mixed question there, I would highly value the technology in that piece where you as a small medium-sized business can utilize that exact same technology that a billion-dollar plus organization is utilizing and be able to have a roadmap for you accordance with that, while to still mold and grow to the next level while again staying on that same platform, utilizing best practices, utilizing all the aspects that come with kind of like a grow to enterprise type of methodology for those types of organizations.
Cool. And then I think too, some of it goes around just costing and how NetSuite's infrastructure looks like. You guys are a named user is how you name or do your costs for licensing. And what does that look like as a company scales? How are they adding additional users in? Are they able to get them at the discounted rate that they originally signed the contract with, and all of those kind of fun things that come into place?
Do you want to say that, Mike?
Well, we're a services firm, right? So we
Yeah.
we tend to stay
You're
out of
more on the implementation side of it, but
we try to
just
stay
at
out
a
of the
high level.
licensing conversation, but we're there to guide both NetSuite and the client from a scoping perspective. And our team of solution architects is pretty experienced and come in and identify the right fit for those clients. And we've got a very strong relationship with our counterparts at NetSuite, so they tend to listen to our advice and not oversell or undersell. I think we are the firm that has to actually deliver it, right, and stand by what we scope and put in that SOW. So I view that as our role, is kind of helping the client understand and rationalize what they're buying and the modules that are being recommended and the suite apps that are being recommended and why, but then also justifying that to NetSuite and the NetSuite team that's coming in and working with the client through their buying cycle.
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
Hamza, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, to kind of look at it from another angle as well, is when a company does sign with us, there is periodic business reviews that we do with them. So we want them to continually be able to, free of charge, by the way, we want them to continually be able to see the investment that they're making and help them continue down the path of being able to scale and grow, answering kind of mixed question there from an implementation standpoint, right? So if there's a new acquisition that's come into play and now you need to stamp another warehouse for that, we can come in, perform the scoping operations for that, which naturally means more licensing from a user count perspective, but also functionality that we can help facilitate and guide them on as best as possible, right? And these happen through our periodic business reviews that our account management team drives.
Yeah. And you see too, like when they're phased approach and maybe they come back to you and a year, 2 years, and it's like, hey, we got to grow and we need some additional applications put into the solution. And then you guys are there helping scope that out further to make sure they're getting what they need. And if that means growing by a user standpoint, then again, you're helping them have those conversations directly with their NetSuite sales rep.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. What type of industries do you guys work with? Is it pretty much everything that's out there? Do you guys specialize in certain ones?
Yeah.
Well, we've certainly carved out a niche in manufacturing and distribution in the product space. So we've been Products Partner of the Year for 2 years in a row now. So products being anything with a product. So manufacturing, distribution, retail, or anything with inventory. All of my old clients, how I came across Bryant Park, were manufacturing and distribution as well. So I think that we've become one of the go-to firms for anything in those industries, as well as anything with complexity, global rollout, consolidation, those types of things. I think, the tougher the project, we're probably one of the firms truly equipped to handle that.
Mm-hmm.
That said, NetSuite goes across many verticals, even outside of manufacturing and distribution. And we have a ton of great experience there across financial services, across SaaS and high tech. So there may be a couple of industries where we don't have as much experience, but we've worked across several. I mean, car washes to baseball teams to industrial manufacturers and HVAC distributors, right? It is broad.
And I think the best way to break that down would kind of be like products, services, and SaaS-based companies. Because NetSuite, to Mike's point, is so malleable, we focus on majority of those. But the product space, to Mike's point, we've won quite a bit of accolades in that ecosystem. So chemical manufacturing, food distribution is a huge go-to-market focus area for us. Food processing, CPG, your standard manufacturing, et cetera, et cetera. So basically anything with a product moving from point A to point B is one of our biggest go-to-market focus areas.
I know I've seen in the last, 3-4 years, how many e-commerce companies NetSuite is usually their number one choice to move forward with, because you guys have that e-commerce platform built in. So people that are just starting out, if they haven't, created their Shopify account or using a Magento, a lot of times I've seen them start out with your platform and then develop it into what they need. Or even if they are Shopify side, they're coming and integrating. And there's just a lot of really great points that how much it's even grown from one of the clients I worked with about 5 years ago, where we were still having to use Celigo to be our middleware to bring in all the data from, Shopify and Amazon and all of our, other companies that were coming in. And then a whole separate unit of, hey, SPS Commerce has to come in for all our EDI orders. And it's just really cool to see how the solution has, grown for the e-commerce world. And you guys have a lot more that you're offering for them, so you don't have to piecemeal as much as had to be done in the last 5 years or so. But yeah, I find that really cool.
And I think people also miss that there is a completely different process for B2B versus B2C e-commerce, right? And NetSuite's, again, I keep sounding like a broken record here, but malleable enough and flexible enough to accommodate even both of those things on the e-commerce side. So that flexibility obviously bodes well for a lot of small and medium-sized organizations that don't want to manage a middleware, right? Mm-hmm. Like an iPaaS platform, and they want to have a direct connection. When they add an item or image within NetSuite, immediately that's going to show up right in their NetSuite, their e-commerce instance. So that's a huge value add for a small organization looking to scale and grow with limited resources.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that I've seen NetSuite really grow in over the last couple of years is manufacturing. Prior to, it was never strong enough to really handle all of the unique processes that are part of manufacturing. It was always like, hey, think of us for distribution. I mean, I was always that person, like, don't go there manufacturing, like go there distribution or anything else. But now you guys have started to develop the core ERP type. So it's not all of these plug and play solutions necessarily. So if you'd be able to just explain a little bit of what you're seeing with the manufacturing and how NetSuite is a more viable fit for them.
Yeah. Maybe Mike, you can start us off, because from a growth perspective, you've seen that from an outside person looking in over the number of years, right? And then I can maybe talk about it from a growth internally as well.
I would say that you're right, Chris. I had a lot of distributors by NetSuite, and I didn't have a lot of manufacturers by NetSuite. But a couple of things have happened. Number one, the products that they were going with, right, that have a lot of functionality, right, that do a lot of things, you still have to get them live and usable. Mm-hmm. And I think that a lot of companies struggled with that, with these less malleable products with a smaller partner ecosystem, both for SIs and third parties that they integrate into. So I think part of it is like there's been a little bit of a market shift. The word's out that might not be the best way to go, that functionality in a demo does not necessarily translate to usability once go lives happen. Mm-hmm. That's combined with some enhancements made by NetSuite, right? They've enhanced their advanced manufacturing module. They're stronger in MES, and they've had partners build out their own suite apps that can handle multi-level bombs better and things like that. More advanced manufacturing. So there's more options not only within the native product, but there's more options in the partner ecosystem. And then you see all of these companies that are ending up these referenceable organizations that are coming up in manufacturing distribution, willing to tell their story. So, I think it's just a combination of all those things. It's the darling of private equity for a reason, mm-hmm. right? And they have a ton of manufacturing clients, and that's a risk-averse bunch. So I think it's kind of a combination of those things happening that's led to NetSuite starting to really break through some of the challenges that they were having with manufacturing even just 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just to add to that, I'd say, we have companies in our portfolio, and this is not me bragging, this is me just saying, what the actuality is, because, consistently, right, even now, Christy, myself and Michael are jumping on with private equity firms, with prospective customers, and other selection firms to help educate them on the timeline of where NetSuite has come to now from a manufacturing standpoint. Historically, yes, to your point, I would not touch NetSuite with manufacturing, but because of the evolution and growth within it being such a malleable system, we have got a tiered approach to the functionality of manufacturing that exists within NetSuite, which I'll touch on here in a second. But just coming back to our customers, I mean, we've got companies that are creating power inverters. We've got companies that are creating robotic arms, right? And manufacturing robotic arms. We've got companies that are, believe it or not, in the aerospace industry, performing MRO operations for engine turbines, right? So that's the level of complexity and depth that these organizations have trusted NetSuite with, and we're successfully, obviously, rolling out, which has been a delight to see. But just coming back to it, right, from an evolution standpoint, within NetSuite, you have your core manufacturing process. Your work order, great, click a button, you've started, you finished, you've now created a product, deprecated inventory. Then the second tier of that functionality is now inclusive of WIP and routings. So now I can have a work order and actually have information go into a WIP account. Upon completion of that, great, I'm going to decrement the inventory, but now I have a WIP component to it. And then the third is now we actually have an MES tablet. So we can have full MES capability, some aspect of capacity planning inclusive of that as well, and a scheduling aspect to actually schedule out certain work orders within a given time frame as well. So that evolution exists, coming back to our point of scaling an organization. companies that come to us may not want to go to that level 3 right from the start. They might just want to start with work orders or whip and routing, right? And then from there, be able to elevate to a more MES handheld tablet type of approach. And with that being said, it's an interconnected solution, right? When we're talking about execution, manufacturing execution type of activities, we shouldn't, not think about the planning operations or demand planning or MRP, supply planning, right? All of these are critical aspects to making sure that the engine runs full circle. And NetSuite has those inherently out of the box now, which historically we did not. So it's come a long way, and it's been extremely successful for the products vertical, which has been the fastest growing sector for NetSuite over the past couple of years here.
Yeah, which is kind of cool to see, because now they can play a little more fairly with everybody else who has been known for being just heavy manufacturing software. I know, like, you always see the Infor, Epicor, IFS are usually those three that come to the table, and it'll be fun to watch over the next year and years to come of how NetSuite can start, essentially taking market share, and they're all being highly competitive with one another. So,
and what we're seeing with competes with those vendors that you mentioned, we didn't mention them, is there's a lot of functionality shown where an organization likes the oohs and ahs and bells and whistles, but implementing it and keeping it in the system, right, from a change management perspective is a completely different story.
Yeah.
So that scalability piece again comes back into mind there.
Helping them understand what they're really going to use term of all of those bells and whistles. What's actually applicable to this business, even considering the future state and where they want to go.
Yeah.
And I think the advisory community has done a really good job of trying to get real with that, right? After all the, the experiences that they've had, and seeing the outcomes of these, right? Not just who won, but who went live, and then 6 months, a year after go live, who's using this, who's enhanced their business because of the ERP that they selected. And that's really the business that we're in, right?
Yeah.
Is creating referenceable customers, creating evangelists for Bryant Park and for NetSuite. So yeah, that shift is happening. It's very real. Yeah.
And I think the other thing where NetSuite is really growing too is the hot topic that everybody wants to talk about is AI. I think everywhere I go today, it's always one of the first things that pops up. But I saw a lot of it last year, especially in the retail space, when it came for utilizing AI with forecasting for all of the seasonality in the retail industry, and how much it really helps clients these days compared to what it did in the past, and also what companies used to have to do manually in multiple Excel spreadsheets. And so they never had a good idea necessarily of what the projections look like, or it took them weeks, months at a time to get what they needed. And I think NetSuite has done a really good job of that, and probably even more than what I'm up to speed on of what you guys can share of just how has NetSuite really used the AI tools inside of their system today to help businesses?
Yeah, from a core NetSuite standpoint, NetSuite's actually been using AI before AI was coined in the way that it has been. There's been functionalities that basically exist within NetSuite from a sales perspective, like an upsell manager is a perfect one that I can position, speaking from a retail perspective, where NetSuite's going to be able to look at the buying history of this customer that exists in the ecosystem. With you clicking a button, it's going to be able to correlate what the products are that are actually on the sales order, and associate upsell products for the CSR rep to be able to position either on a phone call or whatever it may be, that selling motion. So that level of ingenuity would be considered an agent in today's point in time. But that was historically something in NetSuite that existed. And that's just a small piece of the puzzle that exists there, right? There's hundreds of this type of functionality. There's also one from a supply chain tower perspective that exists within NetSuite, which optimizes and balances inventory across the board for all of your network of warehouses potentially, or 3PLs that may exist, right? So that level again of agentification is the terminology that people are using now, exists there. On top of that, with the acquisition of Oracle to NetSuite, which happened, I believe, in 2016, 17, we now get a plethora of R&D funding coming from Oracle directly to NetSuite. NetSuite's going to remain. NetSuite's going to stay. It's not going anywhere. I want to be very clear about that. But naturally, what that means is we're able to get upmarket potential solutions that Oracle has, and for that to come down market. A prime example of that is something in the ecosystem called EPM, Enterprise Performance Management. For all the people on the call, you might be familiar with Hyperion, right? Hyperion is one of the products within the EPM suite. And within that tool inherently, we have a significant amount of AI and significant amount of models that exist in there for us to be able to predict seasonality, predict when we're going to have stockouts, predict when there's a best case and worst case scenario being modeled, and ultimately you're being recommended to move down a certain path within your forecasting perspective. We've also got within that EPM suite something called NSAR, NetSuite Account Reconciliation. So for a lot of the e-commerce brands that we work with, they have multiple marketplaces, multiple e-commerce channels. They need to be able to pull all of that data into NetSuite and then automatically reconcile that data through a matching perspective, right? And all these tools utilize AI to do that more efficiently, effectively reducing headcount.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm curious to see just even more of how it's going to be utilized. And like you said, you've kind of been using it in the background all along before it was even known to people. And what, especially in the small business industry, so much of AI is something they can afford and utilize now, where in the past it was only large companies that had access to that. And so now being able to really utilize it to cut down on one person's time and be able to strategically use it a lot more, I think is going to be a real game changer in the SMB world. And it'll be nice to kind of watch that evolve.
They're going to benefit from it the most, I think.
Yeah.
These with the lean teams that really understand how to use it and adopt it are really going to be the ones that are able to use it to grow.
Yeah.
I think if they can get that down, yeah.
What other trends are you guys seeing kind of shape the future of ERP and NetSuite and just all of the clients that you currently work with?
From a product perspective, I keep coming back to this, but the EPM suite has been a large trend for us in terms of growth. NetSuite also has two other products for CPQ and FSM, Field Service Management, that have also been key aspects to NetSuite's growth. We call those edge products. So from a core NetSuite standpoint, that's really the main drivers that we're seeing. But from, we already kind of touched upon a lot of that in today's conversation, but it would be a more, not a monolithic approach, but more of a best of breed, and organizations wanting advice. With that, a best of breed approach becomes a little bit more confusion, candidly, right? Should I go with a Concur, or should I go with the Ramp, or should I go with a Brex, right? And we at BPC have really built out scorecards working with these partners, right? So it's not biased in any way. And we help advise our customers, well, XYZ is what you're looking for. This is the partner that you should go with. So that consultative approach is also something that we've been working on. But I think we did a great job today of identifying those trends from an ERP standpoint. But Mike, I don't know if you have anything to add there.
No, I think you touched on it. I mean, the trend that I still see a lot in a lot of the customers that we talk to is fear, and us trying to talk them off the ledge that you can put your life in our hands and it'll be okay. But I still, especially family-owned businesses, and rightfully so, these are the ones that I'm talking to, that you can feel it in every question that they ask as you move through the buying cycle, and you get toward the end, you can really feel the uncertainty that they have with this, and knowing that if it goes well, what it can mean versus if it doesn't go well, what that could mean and the implications there. So I think even more so than, when I started in the software selection world a number of years ago, is sort of like people have had plenty of time to see what it can do, but if it goes well and what it can do if it doesn't go well.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of that fear of the unknown in the prospects that I'm talking to, which makes it critical that they come and they don't just take a vendor's word for it, right? That they go out and they get help. Mm-hmm. And that they do their due diligence on who's going to be coming in and doing the actual configuration and the actual implementation, and understanding, who that team is and your team that's going to be working with them. So, and maybe that would be a trend as well, is more scrutiny put on the implementation partner.
Yes.
Right? So we're going into opportunities now where before they even reach out to the vendors, they're saying, hey, we're talking to implementation partners right now, and we're going to interview 3, and you guys are going to be one of them. And, then we're going to start talking to vendors. In private equity, a lot of them, like I've said this, standardize on NetSuite. The biggest decision they'll make is who's going to implement it. And they will go out and do a pretty depth interview process and have all 3 of them scope it. And they'll spend a bunch of time with each of them to make sure that they're making the right decision on the implementation firm. The trust in NetSuite is there. It's proven. The product works, right? So I'm definitely seeing more scrutiny on that rather than just taking the vendor's word for it or the sales rep's word for it or whatever it is, which I think is really smart and vital to this.
Yeah, because you get too many failures that come in, and a lot of people, I think, even like the clients I've worked with, they get these horror stories that they heard at a mastermind meeting, and other people are like, hey, we did it this way, don't do it like we did. And I think that's why it's really important to have the consulting side of it. And that's why, like, the clients I've worked with, that's their first thing. If help us pick. We already know which software we want. I had this a couple years ago, actually, with Microsoft. They're like, we know we want Microsoft, but we don't know which partner is best for us. And going through that process of determining who is going to be the best fit and who has the additional knowledge about the industry that they're working with, to bring things. Because a lot of partners like yourself, you have different methodologies and IP that you've developed that works with certain industries better than others. And so it makes it more advantageous for somebody to then work with a partner like yourself, because that has become something you're really good at in those specific industries. But one thing I want to touch on real quick before we have to call it a day is just around private equity. That's really been growing, and you see that private equity firms, they get very specific on the types of software that they use. So if you guys can kind of speak to what you're seeing in the private equity world.
Yeah, a lot of them, yes, do have a playbook for their portfolio companies. And, it's our job here at Bryant Park to kind of understand what their playbook is. Because if you're going to be partnering with them over, more than one project, right, over the portfolio, is understanding that, making sure your organization understands that, and that you respect that's their approach. NetSuite has really become kind of the preferred ERP of private equity. From a risk standpoint, it passes that test, right? I think it's in what can be a very risky project. It's probably one of the lower risk products out there that you can implement. And then just the length of time that it takes to implement. I mean, I still see and hear about, 12 to 18 month implementations for usually these all-in-one products that we've been referencing. Private equity doesn't have time for that. I mean, they may be looking at making an exit at that point. So something that can get up, keep it simple, functional within 4 to 6 months. And then, again, an advantage of NetSuite, you can keep layering on top of that with additional modules and third parties. That's really what they're looking for, not this like, oh, it has all the bells and whistles, and in 15 months, we'll actually be able to use them. That's just not going to work. So NetSuite has really done an incredible job, at the publisher level, of identifying the private equity firms that They want to be working with, putting in preferred pricing agreements with them, and really kind of building a private equity community around NetSuite. So, big kudos to them. That's enabled partners to go out and kind of do the same thing, because back to a lot of these private equity firms have already decided on NetSuite, and then it's just out, who are the partners that are going to come in and work with us. And they're pretty selective about that.
Oh, I bet.
And a big thing of these private equity firms is obviously consolidation, because the main driver for them is EBITDA, right? So we want to make sure that we reduce licensing costs in some form or fashion by reducing the disparate systems that exist there and consolidating to NetSuite as best as possible, which naturally means, to Mike's point, a shorter timeline to go to market. Obviously, EBITDA is advantageous at that point, and risk is averted, right? The other two themes, I would say, just coming back to your last question, Christy, that we're seeing with private equity specifically, is the concept of consolidation for multiple entities coming under one NetSuite umbrella, which has been a huge go-to-market focus area of ours, and also carve-outs, right? So we've got a TSA in place. We got to be off of XYZ system within the next 6 months. Go. How do we do this, right? And those types of conversations are ones that we're having quite a bit with private equity recently. But long story short, I mean, NetSuite has been a centerpiece in all of those conversations, and it continues to be, just due to the ease of use and potential downstream effects of organizations interacting with NetSuite.
And I think too, just the ability to introduce all that core functionality pretty easily and quickly. And then if they do need to add additional components to it, they can do that after they're already live on the system and getting the data points they need.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you guys so much for your time today. I appreciate it, sharing about what you guys do and all the ins and outs that NetSuite has to offer. So yeah, thanks again.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for having us, Christy. We appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right. Well, thank you, everybody that attended. It was great. And I will see you next week at 2 p.m. Eastern on Monday.